Sal Berry.
The NHL magically finds all these votes.
And Tim Parish.
And I'm not angry or salty or a grudge-holding person. Yeah, right.
This is the Puck Junk Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Puck Junk Hockey Podcast. I'm Sal Berry and with me is Tim Parish. And today we're going to talk about the 2021-22 Skybox Metal Universe Hockey Card Set. We're also going to talk about some NHL topics, including the new coach in Vancouver and the new All-Star Reverse Retro jerseys for the upcoming All-Star game. Tim, how are you, man?
I'm good.
Yeah, I heard you had a little plumbing project.
I always have some project going on. We got new countertops in around all of our sinks. So they install the countertops, but they're not plumbers, so they don't do that. So rather than hire one, we YouTubed it and did it ourselves.
Yeah, well,
it wasn't bad once we figured it out.
Yeah, well, nothing's bad once you figure it out. It's always the figuring out that's the bad part.
We got it down to a science now. I replaced all the shutoff valves, the local shutoff valves on all the pipes, and replaced all the drop cabling for the water intakes and all that. So should be good to go for another 20 years.
Great. And then now you're on your way to freezing your backyard because you already start to know some plumbing stuff. So maybe your next step then will be to make some outdoor ice.
I already have one. We can skate on top of our pool.
Really?
Probably. It's covered in ice.
So I want to start with the coaching change in Vancouver because it was like hockey's worst kept secret for felt like a week, pretty long. I don't know if it was 5 days or whatever. It's like seeing the freight train coming and not being able to do anything about it. Just to give a quick recap, Bruce Boudreau, who was hired in December of 2021. Is that about right?
December of 21, yeah. He replaced Travis Green. So he was fired after 13 months. So he was just replaced by Rick Tocchet, the same Rick Tocchet that, we grew up watching in the 80s and 90s and then watched on TNT on their Wednesday night hockey telecasts. So by Friday, everybody was talking about that. Like, it wasn't just like there's a rumor. It's just like, yeah, the Canucks are expected to announce on Monday that Boudreau's being fired. And, oh, yeah, it's Friday. So, man, could you imagine that? Like, you're going to lose your job in a couple of days and having to go in on the office on Monday. I think pretty much everybody agrees that the Canucks mishandled, well, two things. I mean, one, did they even give Boudreau a fair chance? And two, was that the best way to handle it? Well, I can answer number two, and that's no, it was not. Look, the Canucks are a mess. They're just a complete mess. They're basically referring to them on all of Hockey Talk radio and everything as the Canucks because they just blow everything up. Just the simple way that they handled the whole entire thing. You bring Boudreau in to replace Travis Green, who wasn't, the team was off to a slow start once he, was in there at that point in time. And what was Bruce's record? 32, 15, and 10, something like that at the end of the season from his time taking over. So they narrowly missed the playoff spot. So it's like, good. Here's a guy. He brought a change. He's likable. The players like him. The fans like him. Things seem to work. Now they come out with, they got 39 points going into these games. Well below where they were last year. And, they're fighting for a playoff spot at this point. But just the way that they handled that. I mean, you essentially give zero confidence to a guy that's your coach. And all you can say in public, I'm talking about Jim Rutherford, all he can say in public is, well, Bruce is our coach right now. And it's like, you're showing like no support, not just for your coach, but for your team in general. Basically just saying, we need to do something. And who in their right mind is going to look at that and be like,
wow, that's totally inspiring. I want to go be the leader of that team and fix whatever ails them. Well, apparently we find out, and it's Rick Tocchet. But the thing about Tocchet is he's been sitting on the sidelines since his last coaching gig, and he's wanted to go back into coaching. So I don't put any of this on Tocchet at all because he got hired to do a job. That's it. So this has nothing to do with him. Now, whether he was Rutherford's guy in the beginning or, whether he was Patrick Alvin's guy when he got hired and brought in as the GM, I don't know. I don't know what talks were done. But if you remember a couple weeks ago on the TNT broadcast, they asked Talk straight up about it, and he was just like, I haven't signed anything yet. But he said yet. So, it was hinted that it was going to happen. But honestly, I don't think Boudreau is the problem. I just think there's just too many distractions. They've had too many injury issues. They've just gone through a lot of crap. And
their number one goalie, Thatcher Demko's been out for a while. He's a big part of that team, and really the guys that they've had fill in have not done all that great. They're hurting with injuries, and, that starts with in net. I always feel for a coach when they get hired mid-season and then they get fired mid-season. It's like you never get a chance to really get a chance to coach. Like, yes, you get a chance to coach. Yes, you can affect change and stuff like that. But what I mean is like, if you're going to hire a coach, hire him at the damn start of the season. This mid-season stuff is just bullshit. I'm sorry. It's like, I can understand if your team's a train wreck and you're like, okay, the coach has lost the room. We have to get a new coach in here because this team is a disaster. Then you have to do something. But when you hire a coach midway through the season, they don't even get that full season. They're kind of fixing somebody else's problem. And that's what Boudreau was doing. He was cleaning up a mess that somebody else had made. Then he doesn't even get a full season to show what he could do. When you're hired mid-season, you're fixing somebody else's mess. And then you get a season to show what you can do. And he didn't even get a full season. They really gave him October, November, December, January. So half the season, almost.
We talk about coaches being fired all the time, especially, prematurely fired, or at the end of the season, there's always the big exodus with, Black Monday after everybody misses the playoffs. The axe starts to drop left and right. But we don't often see a guy that's like Bruce Boudreau here. He's a hockey lifer, to use a phrase that's used a lot. He's been in the league basically forever. The guy is so personable. I've never met the guy, but I've seen him on so many interviews. And, when he wasn't coaching, he was part of most of the panels on NHL Network, on the NHL Network radio broadcasts. He's done things for numerous channels that broadcast hockey. He's just got like a great personality. He seems like really easygoing, kind of like a happy guy. And he's already shown he's got a track record of success. He's taken teams to the playoffs numerous times. Tons of respect across the league. And he's a huge WWE fan, too. He loves wrestling, if you didn't know that. But, you talk all the time about this good old boys network, right? That there's this good old boys connection within the NHL, that guys that are cut from the same cloth and come from the same organizational sets will tend to get lumped together because they bring their friends with them. I don't know if that's what happened here, but if you look at it, Rutherford leaves the Penguins, decides I'm going to retire, but then the only thing that could bring him out of retirement was going to the Canucks and taking that Canucks job as president of hockey ops. Then what does he do? He brings in assistant GM Patrick Alvin from the Penguins to be the GM. Now, Boudreau might not be Alvin's guy, so we want to replace him with? We'll replace him with Rick Tocchet, also ex-assistant coach of the Penguins. So you got this Penguins connection there, which is kind of interesting. There might not be anything to it, but the optics of it certainly seem like there is. And let's not forget, Bruce Boudreau's very first goal as a hockey player was scored against none other than Jimmy Rutherford. So maybe there's a grudge there. I'm just speculating, but that part's true, but the speculation part is speculation. But he did actually score his first goal against Jim Rutherford when Rutherford was the goalie on Detroit.
Back in the 70s, Boudreau had to score his first goal against somebody. I mean, it wasn't going to be against Mike Richter or Patrick Waugh or...
No, but there were tons of goalies in the league, and it just so happened to be the one that just fired him. So,
Which is, I think, a funny coincidence. You know,
nothing
Boudreau,
to see here.
Yeah, exactly. I find this kind of funny. Bruce Boudreau played on the Chicago Blackhawks for 7 games in 85-86. He had 1 goal, and he had 2 penalty minutes, and he was the +1. And that was his some career with the Blackhawks. I mean, he played 141 games in the NHL, but I find it funny that he's on the 85-86 team. And, you know, it's funny because I collect Blackhawk team photos, and I don't have an 85-86 photo. And I really want that one because it's the only full color picture of Boudreau I can find in a Blackhawk jersey, because he was in the team photo, but I don't think he was in the team issued set of postcards. And he has a picture in the team's 60th anniversary book, but it's a black and white photo. But I just think that's interesting. And he was like a Blackhawk, and that's kind of one of those things I've always been trying to find, like a photo of him as a Blackhawk, and that's just kind of hard to find.
I've gone back and looked before just to see like what actual cards he has, and he only has 2 actual like major issued cards. And that was in 78, 79, and 79, 80. Everything else after that were either team issued postcards or like minor league AHL or IHL cards. And then later on, like in the modern era, I guess, he had some stuff come up with coaching cards for some of the AHL teams that he coached. And I think in the game Heroes and Prospects at some point threw a couple cards of him in the 75th anniversary set. But other than that, he might be in the Toronto Maple Leaf Centennial set, because I think that covered like everybody who was ever a Leaf. But other than that, like I said, he's got those 2 cards from the late 70s, and that's about it. It's a very small list.
Let's talk about the All-Star jerseys, because I saw those. I thought they're pretty cool. There's things about them I like. There's things about them I don't like. I like the colors. I think I wish the trim colors were the base colors and vice versa. That would mean one would be powder blue and the other one would be that like pink color. I guess it's pink, not like a pink color. It's a pink color. So
it's hot pink.
Okay, hot pink and powder blue. If you're going to go Miami Vice all the way. Don't just like make it a black jersey with, but we put a little bit of pink and blue on the cuffs. Aren't we being edgy and retro? Because if you're going to go black and white, then you need to go with the old school 80s uniforms. The 90s All-Star uniforms, you had, was it like a dark teal and purple, right? It was blue and purple, but I'm trying to articulate. It wasn't quite Sharks teal. It was kind of like a darker teal.
Yeah. You know, obviously there's been various incarnations of the jerseys and the colors, but, you know, with this one, they threw it all the way back to 94. I mean, these basically look like the 94 jerseys. And I first thought it was fake because when I saw the leaked photos, did nobody zoom in onto these to see that they say NHL All-Star 1994 inside on the collar? But when the actual photos came out, they say the same thing. So it must be a retro design that they had made that's specifically to show that it's a throwback to that. The thing is, I don't think any of the players should be able to wear those jerseys without also wearing a pair of Armani pants and loafers with no socks, because that's the only thing that would make sense to me. So when the players are showing up on the red carpet and walking in, I expect them all to be looking like Crockett or Tubbs.
I liked those 90s jerseys, but I guess that's just because I liked hockey in the 90s. So, I mean, again, I have a fondness for those 80s black and orange and white uniforms that were all-star jerseys. It made sense. They were the color of the NHL logo, so they pulled from those colors. And then when they switched from 94 to 97, when they switched to the one team wearing teal and white and the other team wearing purple and black, I was just like, well, that's cool, because it's the 90s, and that's where the colors really were headed. If you think about all the team colors from the 90s, you had the Sharks with their teal, you had the Ducks with their eggplant. You were getting all these like bold colors and bright colors, and you think about the color palette of the 90s. So yeah, it kind of made sense. And yeah, I get it. They're using those Miami Vice type colors. I think they're cool. I'd wear one. But then I say that about almost every All-Star jersey. I mean, some of the later ones I didn't really like, from like the past 10 years.
Like the ones where you can barely see the logo because it's almost the same color as the jersey.
Yeah, those weren't really good. And I didn't like the ones that had like, I'm looking at the 2015 jersey right now, and it had like neon green. It's like black with neon green stripes. And then the white ones had neon green stripes. And I like neon green and I like black, but it doesn't look as cool as, say, like those Dallas Stars Mountain Dew type jerseys, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, they're third jerseys.
Yeah.
I call those electric death.
When they did the teams are just going to wear their own logos, and we're just going to do all black and all white, and then just kind of ghost those logos. I guess that was okay, because then you could tell what team the player was on, but it also seemed kind of lazy. Well, Sidney Crosby's going to wear this black Penguins jersey with a black logo, and it's just like, okay, like, not really.
They should go to what like Major League Baseball did and just have the players wear their own jerseys. And that way you don't know who's on your team and you're just passing to the wrong people, and it could be just a giant mess.
No, because you have half the guys wear their white jerseys and the other half the guys wear their dark jerseys, and it basically becomes a rat hockey game. It just becomes a giant pickup game, but of the best players in the world, where it's like,
isn't that what it's kind of already become?
What?
At this point, is just a pickup game. I feel like that's what it's starting to become. I mean, you saw what they did to the Pro Bowl, right, for NFL?
What did they do this time?
It's not a football game. It's flag football.
That's fine.
Like,
do you really want
to see flag football?
No, nobody wants to have a career-ending injury because of a Pro Bowl game.
The only one that ever took the Pro Bowl seriously was Peyton Manning. And if he's not playing, then nobody else needs to take it seriously either. So it's good to get voted. That's great. Most of these guys, I think, probably would rather have the weekend off. But I still think we need the All-Star game. I absolutely think we need it. I don't like the way the whole thing went down with voting, but we talked about that before.
No, let's talk about that some more, because we were talking about the vote, but now the votes are in, and you have some things to say about that.
It's kind of interesting that you have this public vote, right? And you're taking votes from, the general peons of society that can pick who they want to see in the All-Star game. I get it. I like that. I have no problem with how they do that. And I'm not angry or salty or a grudge-holding person. Yeah, right. But just the results, when they revealed them, it's kind of unfortunate, because it appears to me like the NHL did some creative math to figure out who actually won. Because as you saw leading up to the votes, I mean, there were plenty of websites out there that use statistical analysis to figure out where people were percentage-wise in the overall vote tallies, based off of summarizing how many votes people got, how much interest they got, how many votes were being cast, and all of that kind of stuff. But it certainly wasn't the NHL that was making that available like they have in the past. You used to see a little running clock. Oh, they have 80% of the vote. They have this many votes. They have that many votes. They didn't want all that out there. Ever since John Scott messed the whole thing up for Gary, he has since, what did I call it? Gary rigged it. And, for those that don't know what that means, Bettman, the commissioner of the NHL, who's been there since '93.
Gary Bettman, yes.
Yes. And he used to be the senior vice president and senior counsel for the NBA, so he already had sports background. And don't get me wrong, you got to give credit where credit is due. He did a lot to help grow this game from like a $400 million league into something that's worth multi-billions. But he's also helped expand the game into other areas it wouldn't normally be. So that ticks off all of the diehard, let's stick to what we know kind of thing. And He also oversaw not one, not two, but 3 work stoppages, plus a whole season being wiped out. That's never happened, really. Because he advocates so much for non-hockey markets, he gets a lot of flack from the true, I don't want to call them true diehards, but you know what I'm talking about, the fanatical hockey fans. So I made up that term simply based off of the situation. So I'm calling it Gary rigged, because you take the draft, for instance, it was the same until 1994. Bettman comes in, and then 95, he made it so non-playoff teams weren't eligible for the draft lottery. Then he tweaked it again in 2013. Then he tweaked it again in 2015. Then again in 2020. And now again in 2022. So they keep adding more rules and changing things and changing the percentage and the odds and who can get in and who can't get in. And, better or worse, I don't care. You decide. But you have that. You have the digital advertising, what I'm going to call a debacle. Sure, it's generating revenue, but I haven't met a single hockey fan that's watched the games and doesn't have a problem with seeing the dasher boards flash and make their players disappear when they're on the ice. I've heard plenty of people say, it's no big deal. And Gary is one of those that says it's no big deal, because he even went out and exclaimed in his State of the Union address that the polling we do with our fans gives us the feedback, and it's a non-issue. And he said, many people think it looks better than having the numerous logos on the dasher boards, and it's working extraordinarily well. What polls are you doing? Is it the same polls and the same voting that the All-Star game was rigged about? Because I would believe that, because there's nobody saying that. And especially there's not a majority of fans saying that. Now, I get it. The logos aren't going anywhere onto the jerseys because it generates revenue. They're not going anywhere off the helmets. They're certainly not going to go anywhere off the digital dashboards. But they do need to do something to fix it so they don't have all the glitches, because there's a ton of it and it's annoying. So, all that being said, here's All-Star Game. They have voting available on social media. It's evidently clear that they put more weight into the physical voting online than they did on the social media voting. It's clearly evident, because if you looked at how the players were trending going up into the vote, I mean, there were so many guys that are deserving to be in this game that were getting tons and tons and tons of votes on social media. But yet in the end, they bring in people that I wouldn't have even thought about it. So, I have a lot to say, and you're like, but DFG, the All-Star Game's a giant waste of time and no one cares. And I absolutely respect that opinion, because a lot of people share it. But the All-Star Game is a joke, people, and the All-Star Game doesn't matter, people. The players hate it, which I even brought up. I don't think they hate it as much as a lot of them would like a week off. But yeah, it's not tournament-level competition, which I like that, because it gives the players a break. They don't have to go balls to the wall and play like that. Yeah, does it mean anything? Maybe not in the grand scheme of things. It's certainly not even up to a regular season type tilt between 2 middle of the road teams that are just fighting to get a playoff spot. There aren't 2 points at stake. There aren't potential jobs on the line. No one's going to get fired if they don't show up and have a poor performance in the All-Star Game. I get all that, but it's fun. It's fun for the fans. I think it's fun for a lot of the players. And to me, it's the game that's the human game, because for every reason I've already said, players can finally breathe for a second. They can let their guards down. They can show you kind of that they're human beings and they're not some cliche spewing hockey machine like we're used to them being. Their personalities can essentially just rise to the top, right? And it gives them that capability to have fun and joke around and talk freely and just be themselves. And I think that draws more fans in, especially younger fans that are more prone to watching 30-second clips on various social media or whatever of people doing different stuff. This gives them that showcase to be able to play to that, I think. And it's revenue. I mean, that's the other thing too. It hasn't always been the revenue generated by the All-Star Game was always went to like the player, what is it, like the retirement
emergency assistance
fund?
fund.
Like the emergency assistant or retirement fund or whatever it is. So it's revenue generating for a program that's really good and does a lot of good work for ex-players, as we all know, and has been focused on a lot over the last few years. Mental health and physical health of players and things with CTE and all that kind of stuff is popping up a lot as guys retire. So they're going to need that extra medical care. So having something that can generate revenue for that, I think is great. So whether it's digital advertises or a PPG logo on a helmet, fine. Just don't let it be a distraction. That's the thing. And when they do stuff like this, it takes away from the event itself and puts everybody's focus on, oh, there's a conspiracy. There has to be, because it's not, working out right. Because the whole world is cynical, it's degrading, it's harsh, it's crass, and that's proven by all the responses that fans have given over the event and how it was picked out. But, the echo chamber on social media, people yelling into the void, it just creates this giant toxic environment. And I'm guilty of that myself a lot of times. So being able to find a way to break away from that seriousness and competitiveness and that intensity is not only good for the players, it's good for the fans. It's like, relax. This is fun. Just have fun and enjoy it. You don't have to focus on winning all the time. You can have fun. You can just be a fan of the game, because even though the game might not matter, that's why we need it.
Well, I like how they changed the game to the 3-on-3 format. I think that was really the life that the All-Star game needed. We've talked about this way back in the past during the whole John Scott controversy, where he was voted as one of the All-Star captains, but they changed it to a 3-on-3 format. 3-on-3, so you're going to have a lot of skating, a lot of shooting, a lot of scoring, maybe not as much hitting and rough stuff, and that's fine. So players aren't going to really get injured. They might get tired, but they're not going to get hurt. This isn't like a 5-on-5 where somebody goes into the corner and then they get obliterated by a defenseman.
No one plays defense.
No
one checks in the corners. I mean, other than the goofy few years ago when John Scott wanted to fight Patrick Kane, but they were just playing around. It was just goofy. So, you don't see that kind of stuff. I think I've only ever seen one All-Star game where it was in the very end, the last period, and guys were just going full on skating. And that was years ago, before the 3-on-3. So, and I don't remember what was at stake there. I don't know if it was $1 million went to the team or everybody got a truck, or I don't know what it was. It was something.
Everybody gets a truck.
But nobody played until the very end, when it was oh crap, we need to score 7 goals because we're behind.
By 7 goals, right?
Yeah, behind 14-7.
So I'm reminded of what happened in 2007 with Rory Fitzpatrick, when fans were trying to get him voted into the All-Star game.
I remember that.
You remember that?
Yes.
Vote for Rory.
Yes.
So he was with the Canucks at the time. Basically, fans were trying to get him voted in as a starter. And what happened was fans were trying to get him voted in as a starter because the NHL was doing this hey, you can vote, and you can vote as much as you want. And they kind of wanted that kind of stuffing the ballot box a little bit. They were kind of trying to encourage that. But then when it was a guy who was having an average season, good player, respectable defenseman, but he was having an average season that year, but he was in second place. So he would have been one of the 2 starting defensemen. Well, with a week to go, the NHL magically finds all these votes for Nicklas Lidstrom that came in at the very end. So he ends up being the other Western Conference starter for defensemen. Because Fitzpatrick, if he was in first place, it would have been kind of hard to do anything about that. But because he was in second place and you vote for 2 defensemen, the NHL found enough votes for Lidstrom to basically make it so that Fitzpatrick didn't finish second. However, the thing is that when you filled out an all-star ballot, you couldn't just vote for your one guy and be done. You had to vote for all 12 starters.
Right. So that was where the controversy came in.
Yes, because it was okay, Lidstrom has this extra 200,000 or whatever votes. We'll just say 200,000. That's not the number, but just for argument's sake. So that
means no one else has any.
And no one else got the extra. So if he got 200,000 votes, that means 11 other players also got 200,000 votes that had to be kind of distributed somehow. It didn't add up. So it's they just found these votes.
If I remember right, I think it boiled down to 20,000 or 25,000 votes. That's all it was. There was no competitive balance with any of the other votes. Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. It's kind of silly, but
right.
Yeah.
Weird. Oh, here, 23,000 votes. Yeah, so it wasn't 200,000. It was 23,000. So only 10% of that. But that's still quite a number.
And it was such a debacle on voting and everything else. You know what he does now? He's a politician. Did you know that? He ran for office.
Who did?
Rory
Really?
did. Yeah. Yeah, he's a politician now. So talk about voting fraud.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, he retired from everything else. Like he operated like a restaurant and stuff for a while and did some things. So he got into politics a few years ago. And I think he's like a town superintendent or something like that. So it's low end politics, but it's an elected position nonetheless. So
that's cool.
So he got elected to something.
Hey, all right. Well, I guess there is a happy ending. If you work hard enough, you too can succeed. Coyotes third jerseys. I'm surprised you brought that up when you're like, hey, let's talk about this, because I saw those. I love the Coyotes brick red jerseys. I love that color scheme when they went with the brick red, the black, and that like sand color, tan, whatever. Love that. To me, that was peak Coyote jersey right there. Everybody calls the Kachina jersey the Picasso jersey. I call it the peyote jersey because it looks like you're on peyote when you look at that logo. That seems like the kind of thing you'd hallucinate. Or the Picasso jersey is also an acceptable name for it, even though it's a Southwestern design and a native Kachina figure. But yeah.
These jerseys have no logo on them.
But they say Arizona, right?
They have like a script A and then Arizona across the front. But they're that color. I have no problem with the color. And then they have that like kind of Native American pattern around the bottom, like the Southwestern kind of pattern, and on the sleeves as well. And when I first saw them, I'm like, these look like pajamas. Or they look like ugly Christmas sweaters. One or the other, because it's almost that same kind of design. But then I saw the players skating around with them on the ice. And I was like, wow, those actually kind of look sharp.
Yeah, I thought they looked good. But then again, like I said, I'm more of a fan of that color. Like if they went back to their like 2006 designs or whatever, those mid 2000s to late 2000s, you know, the Gretzky coaching era. That was peak Coyote jersey right there. Their on ice play was atrocious, but their jerseys were pretty sweet.
Yeah, let's see how much more we can make this franchise a circus.
Well, let's see.
That's what that era was.
Yeah, it's funny that the Coyotes are the team that the NHL keeps propping up no matter what. No matter what. It's like nobody wants to own
clarify
the team.
that. That's Gary.
Yeah.
That's
Gary.
All directive of Gary. Because he can't admit defeat and he has to keep salvaging and saving. And that's fine. Go ahead and do it. I mean, I'd love to see them stay where they are. But it's like been one thing after the next, after the next, after the next. And any other team in any other market, he would have shut the door and sent them U-Haul.
Yeah, the fact that the league owned the team for a while because nobody wanted to buy the team, so they owned the team, and that's just ridiculous if you think about it. Like somebody with deep pockets could have bought the team and moved it to, Hamilton, Ontario, or gosh, maybe Houston or someplace, maybe Quebec City, which would be funny that the Jets go to the desert and then they go to Quebec, like the whole franchise thing, which I don't like that term. Like when they go, oh, he's the all-time franchise leader. It's like, you know what? I'm sorry. The people in Quebec really don't care about what the team in Colorado does. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Do the people who watch the Winnipeg Jets right now, do they really care about the Atlanta Thrashers era, or are they more interested in the Jets 1.0? You know what I mean? You can take the quote-unquote franchise to another city, but I feel like when you leave the team, you got to leave that history behind. And it gets just, the all-time franchise leader. It's just like, who cares?
I think it's hard to do that, though, because if you do that, you basically bury the team. And so the only person or the only people that are going to know about it are those that collect hockey cards or are students of the game that go back historically and look. Mm-hmm. When you hear that and they say, if it's a younger or newer fan watching and they say, oh, the all-time franchise leader, and it shows like the name of the player or something, and it shows that they played on a different team, and you're thinking, wait a minute, is that a typo on the screen? Who is this team? Might cause you to go and try to find out. So it might be a teaching lesson. I don't know.
Yeah, it just seems kind of.
To us, it seems kind of silly, but
right.
Whatever.
You want to talk about the Sirius XM contract with the NHL?
Yeah, the NHL re-upped their. I mean, there's not much to it other than that. They re-upped their contract with Sirius XM to have XM NHL radio on Sirius XM. So something I've listened to. I don't want to say every day, but at least 4 out of 5 days during the week. On my commute to work and commute home, and I have it on in my office. And there's a very lively cast of characters on most of the shows that they broadcast throughout the day on there. And it'll be nice to see them get an opportunity to continue and grow the game through that media source, which is cool. They also announced that all of the guys get to go to the All-Star game and do like reporting and stuff, which is cool because they haven't done that in a very long time. So that'll be kind of cool.
Yeah. So, hockey cards?
Sure. I like them. Is that all?
Yeah, I like them too. All right, That's a show, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Wrap it up.
Yeah, exactly. No, so SP Game Used. 2021-22 SP Game Used embroidered. So embroidered is an insert set in that or something?
Yeah, it's a manufactured patch set that was inserted into the product. And
so wait, hold on. It's called SP Game Used, which implies,
I suppose,
but they're putting manufactured patches in a product called SP Game Used.
This is just one set in the mix of them, but the idea behind it is more or less, I don't know what you would call it, like a nickname set, maybe.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of cool. Topps sort of did something like this in baseball a few years back, but it's done a little differently. So you have various players. Most of the set, I think there's 100 cards in there. You got 50, I want to say it's like 50 base players, like current players. There's 25 legends and 25 rookies.
You said base players, and I got excited. I'm like, oh, is Les Claypool in that set?
Yeah, there's 50 base players. They've got them all.
3 listeners of our show who knows who Primus is, yeah.
They got Geddy Lee on there. They got Pete Way. They got Nikki Sixx. They've got Lemmy. I mean, you name it, they're on that list.
Gotta have Flea.
Flea's on there, yep. Victor Wooten. I mean,
you name it. Base players, right? Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I couldn't think of the word. Like veterans.
Yeah, base cards. I get it. Yeah. They say base veterans is what they usually call it. Like 50 base veterans and short printed rookies and whatnot.
All of the cards, like the patches, have something to do with like a player nickname or something about the team or something specific like that. And as we all know, the great Eddie Belfour was known as
the Eagle.
The Eagle, right? And Mark Messier, another Hall of Famer, had the nickname of Moose. Well, turns out that the patches for Eagle and Moose were flip-flopped. So the Eagle is on Messier card and Moose is on the Belfour card.
Wow. So
I didn't see any other ones like that yet, so I don't know if that was, something else, but yeah, apparently there was a screw up with the I don't know if it was the pack out or the printer or something like that, but I guess it wouldn't be the pack out, it would have been the printer, since the pack out people just stuff the boxes. Yeah, so there's both of those floating around all over the place. You can find them on eBay, and they're funny to look at because you see Moose on a Belfour card and you're like, what? Did he play for the Manitoba Moose? What is this card? And then you realize, oh, wait, the Messier card says Eagle on it.
Well, now, Johan Hedberg would also be an acceptable use of Moose.
Correct, and that's immediately what I thought when I saw it. But then I'm like, I doubt they would put Hedberg in a checklist. And sure enough, he's not, of course. But
no.
I also thought some other ones were kind of weird, too. Like, John Gibson said Rocket Man. And I'm like, I get what that is. But it turns out, the NHL does those like little snippets with like interviews with players and asks them silly questions and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one a while back that was, if you could change your first name, what would you change it to? And people were giving all sorts of answers, and John Gibson's answer was Rocket Man. So instead of John Gibson, it would be Rocket Man Gibson. So I'm pretty sure that's where that came from.
Wow, so you have to like know this one joke that aired on an episode of NHL Now like 6 months ago?
Honestly, I haven't. I mean, I don't know that I recall anybody ever calling him that. So that's why I was confused. And there was a conversation on Twitter about it. And then when I found it, I'm like, oh. So yeah. But it's interesting. It's just a screw up. I'm not faulting him. It's just a funny one that was kind of created.
Now, I thought this was interesting is that 22-23 Artifacts came out recently, and you mentioned that Sebastian Aho is on the box.
Yeah, Aho's the cover boy on the box.
Which is great, but then he's not in the base set. So, yeah.
Not in the base set, and if you look at the totality of the checklist, he's only got 2 cards, the whole checklist, that I could find. He might have a parallel or something somewhere, but all I saw was the clear-cut rookie retro card and a Tundra teammate dual card with Marty Necas. That was it. That's the only place he showed up on the checklist. That's one thing I found interesting. But I will say this. Yes, it did come out. 4 cards per pack, 8 packs per box. So typical Artifacts configuration that we've seen for quite a long time. They promised 3 hits and 1 rookie and 4 numbered parallels. That's kind of been the same also. They don't make mention that the Arum cards are necessarily a hit. However, they say the hits are relics, autographs, or what they're calling tech inserts. So if Arum is included in the tech inserts, then yes, that's one of your hits. From what I could find on the checklist, the tech inserts are special printing technology that they used on some parallel cards. So some of them have wood grain, like actual wood grain on the sides. And it sort of just looks brown, and you probably wouldn't notice it unless you ran your fingers across it.
Oh, that's weird.
They also have a leather one, same thing. It's got a leathery finish, kind of like what they did with Ingrained a couple years ago.
Oh, that insert set that was like the thick wood cards?
Yeah, that was actually it was a full set by itself. It was released in packs.
Because I have an Ingrained card of Chris Chelios, and it's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, so it's like that, and then there's also plexi ones, which I can only assume are on the plexiglass, kind of like the trilogy. The trilogy cards were always with the what were they called, like showstoppers or something like that. Yeah, even though this came out, basically it came out today as we're recording this. I've watched 2 case breaks on this and a single box break. Guess how many autos?
Well, there's supposed to be 1 per box. Well, they could be 1 per box.
Could be 1 per box. 2 cases and 1 box. How many autos?
So how many boxes in a case? I guess that's the first question I need to ask.
20.
Oh, that many. It's probably an auto in every other box. That would be my first guess. Just, I want it to be 1 per box because to me, an autograph is always a selling point. And when you don't get an autographed card in a high-end or a higher-end set, I always found that disappointing. Like, oh, I got another jersey card. Great. Or, oh, I got this tech insert of a player I don't necessarily collect, right? But if it's an autograph, even if it's a player that I don't collect, it's still an autograph. So my guess is 1 in every other box.
And that would be a reasonable guess, but 0 is the answer.
0 what?
0 autographs. 2 cases and an extra box. 0 autographs.
So out of 41 boxes that you watched get broken on YouTube or whatever.
By 3 different breakers.
No.
Not a single auto.
So there's no autographs, basically.
Well, there are. But the autograph hits obviously aren't falling anywhere close.
That's a pretty big sample.
People are assuming. And it is. And if you look at the checklist, they're in there. I mean, look, Artifacts has always been that set where it's Artifacts. That's what it is. It should have game used pieces, and it should have pieces of glove and pants and sticks and buttons and all of that kind of stuff. And it has traditionally. Yeah,
get
but
an
it hasn't
auto
really been
fax.
focused.
Mhm.
Yeah, auto fax. That's exactly what I was getting at. And, a couple years they started sticking sticker autos on the dual jersey cards to make them dual jersey auto cards. Kind of like they did with, what's the most recent one that they did? Allure. They did that to Allure. But they used to do that to artifacts years ago. So, yeah, a lot of people are not really happy about that. I don't buy artifacts looking for autos. I never have. But I think if the auto hits are going to come at such a low rate, I think they got to drop that price point. Otherwise, people are going to really sour on it quickly.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I understand that getting autographs was kind of hard during the pandemic because you had to mail people stuff, you had to get it back. Things had to be signed in front of a witness. That's hard to do with social distancing, etc. You had the bubble league and this and that. But I mean, now we're a couple years past that now, right? I mean, 3
Well, we
years
are,
ago.
but you got to remember this is 22-23 artifacts, which means an artifacts is always a first of the year product.
Right.
So that means the design for this was going down a year ago.
True.
Which means a year ago, the photos that they had to choose from were from either the first part of 21-22 or the 2021 season.
Right.
So most of the cards you get of players currently, if they were traded in the last 2 years, they may be on their old jersey.
Probably, but
because it's a first product. So you got to float that time frame around to kind of fit the narrative a little bit from the manufacturer standpoint. I don't think we should be in this position, but for a reasoning standpoint, that would probably be the best reasoning.
So I guess what I'm getting after is autographs are really just becoming that much harder to get now. And
absolutely.
In a product, I mean, to me, that's always a selling point. The jersey patch stuff, you know what? When I got back into collecting, really got back into collecting in 2006, I had absolutely no use for jersey cards. To me, they were a waste of time. They were filler. I thought they inflated the value. I'd look at a product like Upper Deck Series 1, and back then you'd get 3 jersey cards per box. And I'd say, these just inflate the price of the box, get rid of them, make the box cheaper. I want the base cards. I want the young guns. Maybe I want some of the inserts, but I didn't want the jersey cards. So to me, they just became something that, quote unquote, added value to the product, but also inflated the cost of the product because you had to buy the jerseys. Upper Deck had to buy the jerseys to cut up and put in the product. I get that. Now, you look at Upper Deck Series 1, Series 2, Extended Series, you might get a jersey card, but regardless, the price is still high. It's you probably won't get a jersey card, but the price is still kind of up there. I mean, it's higher than what it was back then. And I get it, things go up in price. But now I kind of feel like with all these third jerseys, reverse retro jerseys, you have players changing jerseys every other shift. Well, maybe not really, but a game-used jersey now is not the same as a game-used jersey from 30 years ago. Who do you think had more jerseys in their career, Mario or Sidney?
I mean, the obvious answer is Sidney, because through most of the 80s, I think most players only had 2 or 3 jerseys.
Yeah.
They just washed them and gave them back to them.
Yeah, they'd usually get 1 or 2 home jerseys and 1 or 2 road jerseys, and that was it, and you'd have guys get traded and they'd pull up the name off the jersey and put another name on the jersey. You had that sort of thing, right? So to me, it's you could say, oh, it's a piece of a Sidney Crosby jersey and therefore this card is more valuable. But it's Crosby wears a lot of jerseys. He does. You know what I mean? There's no shortage of Sidney Crosby jerseys to be cut up and used for memorabilia cards. And I'm talking about game-worn jerseys, game-used jerseys. Don't even get me started on that event-worn nonsense that most card companies don't even touch that anymore. They don't even do that because, or if they do, they really just kind of say, it's what do they call it? They don't say event used. Well, they say a manufactured jersey piece or whatever.
Here's the only thing I would say to that.
Yeah.
I think Upper Deck does a good job of striving to try to eliminate redemptions and stuff their product with, the actual cards when they can. Artifacts has always had a redemption as part of its box. That's
Right.
always been part of the whole thing because you get this product so early, we don't know who those rookies are going to be. So we're going to pick them later. I will say this, the one single box I saw opened, they pulled a redemption for the rookie retro #1 pick. So that's going to be obviously Slafkovsky, I would assume. That was a pretty good one, and I can forgive no autographs just based off of that. But again, we're talking about artifacts. Artifacts is artifacts. I don't necessarily consider an autograph an artifact. An artifact is more something, tangible that you can touch.
Yeah.
So parts of the uniforms or sticks or whatever, or equipment or whatever, I think that's the draw to this product, and it always has been the draw to the product. You're right, prices keep going up. The cost of buying this stuff on the secondary market is going up. Just look at how sports memorabilia has been. Look at what the card market's done. People are bonzo about this stuff. And yeah, sure, you look at some of the other sports, cards have lost value, quote unquote, as if they had value in the beginning. And people are taking a bath on what they spent on investing, quote unquote, in all of these cards. It hasn't really hit hockey. I don't know that it actually will. Yeah, we have our ups and downs with certain players when they do really good and outperform their contracts and do crazy stuff, a la Tage Thompson, who nobody cared about last season. But,
Right.
You have those situations that are kind of one-offs. But I think Upper Deck does a good job of trying to get those game-worn pieces into their product. Because if you read most of them, they say on the back, this was a game-used piece. They don't do a lot of the event stuff, but when they do, you already know about it. Especially like with SP Game Used, where they have all the All-Star skills stuff. Most of those are event used because you get pieces of banners and all sorts of stuff because they have so many other things that they can pick up and buy that are memorabilia pieces. Versus buying the actual jersey, like you said, there might be a bigger supply of them now, but I think the prices have all gone up. I'm just glad they haven't gone the route of Panini, where on the back of their cards they say something to the effect of, this is not associated with any particular game, event, player, or anything else. So you just have a piece of something. You don't know where it came from. It could have been the tablecloth from the guy that actually put the card together. You don't know. Could be a piece of his sock. You don't know.
That's what I was thinking of. The piece of memorabilia is not associated with any team, player, or game. And I have seen that, and I think that's ridiculous. Like, why cut up a jersey and put it on a card? I can understand people saying, oh, this is a piece of a jersey that Sidney Crosby or Alexis Lafreniere or Ryan Suter or Patrick Kane or whomever, right? Like, you could say, okay, I like this player and this is a piece of jersey that they wore. All right, whatever. I mean, I think it's silly to cut up a jersey, but I do collect some jersey cards, mainly of the players that I like. But
that's been Panini's thing for a very long time. And I even saw recently somebody posted that they took a Panini card and decided to cut it up. And they pulled the jersey swatch out of it. And the sticker that's on the back of the jersey swatch was not the sticker identifying the player in the card that you would assume that it's supposed to be of.
Mm-hmm.
It had a completely different player's name tagged on the back. And most of the swatch pieces, if you've seen cards tore apart on the square, if you flip them over on the back, most of them have labels that show the player's name.
I might have
this one had a completely different player. And it's like, okay, do you have an issue with the manufacturer then because they're frauding you out of something? Well, no, because if you flip it over and look on the back, it said this may not be the player or from an event or from a game or basically anything. So, yeah, you got a jersey piece. It's not from this guy. It's from this other guy, but you would have never known that until you tore the card up.
So I might have to volunteer one of my cards, put it in the old bagel slicer and cut it in half and split in half and see what the jersey piece says, because now I'm intrigued.
Yeah, and I took a Tom Pody jersey card apart. I think it was like a 05-06 Upper Deck game jersey card.
Now, why would you do that to U.S. Olympic player Tom Pody?
Because I had 7 of them.
1998 U.S. Olympic team that I think finished 7th.
Yeah, because I had 7 of them.
Okay.
And it's a Franken card that had him in a Rangers jersey, and it said Toronto Maple Leafs across the bottom. and the patch piece that's in it was black. So I don't know where that came from or what was going on. So I cut it up just to see, and it's an upper deck card. It didn't have anything on the back of the swatch. It was just a piece of thing. But I know all the ones I've seen of Panini, they have a player label on the back. So I don't know if Upper Deck does that too, but the ones I saw have not. But like I said, back to my original point, I think they try to get this stuff in the product, which pushes the price up a little bit, just to have this variety and have all these extra things and stuff that maybe you or I aren't interested in, but there might be somebody else out there that's willing to drop more money than we are to get some of those things, like a flip-flop manufacturer patch of Mark Messier that says Eagle.
All right, let's talk about 21-22 Skybox Metal Universe. In one show, we're basically talking about cards from this year and cards from last year. So I was a big fan of the 2021 Skybox Metal Universe set, and I know we did a show about that. And then a couple shows back, we did a preview of 21-22 Skybox Metal Universe, and I got a box. I like it. I'm going to build the set. Just to give you a quick overview, a hobby box was pre-selling at $150. Now that price is down to about $140. So it's trending in the right direction, if you ask me, because you know, when you had the 2021 boxes that were pre-selling at almost $300, nope, not interested. Did not even get close to buying one of those.
And after you run through the stats, I'll tell you why it's dropping in price.
Okay. You get 15 packs per box, 7 cards per pack. There are 100 base cards to collect. Those are of the veteran players. Then there's 100 short prints, 50 alternate jersey cards of the veteran players, but wearing a different jersey, like maybe an all-star jersey, maybe a third jersey, or some sort of other jersey that they're not pictured on their normal base card. And then there's 50 rookies. And, you know, I'll talk more about the design itself, but now I'm intrigued. Why did the price go down a bit?
Well, you brought up those alternate jersey cards.
Yep.
Remember the previous Metal Universe set, those alternate jersey cards were all all-star cards.
Correct. And I liked that.
They had no all-star game to take pictures for this product, which is why they're all third jerseys or alternate jerseys or reverse retros or whatever. That's why they didn't use all-star game jerseys. But to get to the bigger point, and this is just my theory, because what happens time and time again when a new product drops? The breakers go crazy. And there's case breaks all over the place, and cases upon cases upon cases of everything that was pre-ordered being busted and opened within the first hours, if not hundreds and hundreds of cases in the first few days of being out there. Well, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was 3, maybe 4 hours on the day of release that the gold retro Cole Caulfield PMG was pulled and put online. Like, the product's live for a couple hours. And the biggest card in the entire shebang is pulled and put up for auction. So what does that say to people going out and collecting, looking for that, you know, my ship has come in card? It's gone already. You can't get it. Now, there's other good cards. There's lots of good cards in there. I mean, heck, those green PMGs are pretty cool looking. But the number one card in the entire set was pulled within hours of the product release. I mean, I'm no mathematician, but to me, that would be a telltale sign that the price is about to drop.
Well, because
every big card you take off the list, total value comes down. Merely speculating, but that's my theory. It's still a good product. There's good stuff in there. You can hit some good stuff.
But there's other PMG golds in the set. It's not just Cole Caulfield. And honestly, I would probably want Trevor Zegras, even though you said he's just a one-trick pony. I'm quoting you.
Well, I mean,
I think that was a specific quote from the DFG.
It may have been. I don't know.
I don't know. No, we were talking about who should be Rookie of the Year. And actually what you said was Zegras had a really nice goal, is what you said. And I thought about it and go, yeah, that makes sense. He had a really nice goal.
He did.
But, yeah.
Said a few of them.
I mean, look, he's on the cover or he shares the cover of NHL 23, and I think that's awesome that they went to a younger, hipper player, somebody of the TikTok generation. But I mean, I could get it.
You know what
like,
the issue is, though, right? He plays for the Ducks. Cole Caulfield's on the Habs. Right there,
Yeah.
you've multiplied your fan base by 3,000.
Yes.
So
Yes, that's true.
Whether you agree with it or not, or you like one player better than the other, you can't argue that that Caulfield card would be more desirable than the Zegras one. And if you put them back to back and tried to sell them at auction and just let it go, there's no doubt in my mind that the Cole Caulfield would outperform a Zegras of the same ilk. Probably tenfold at least.
Yeah. And even though Moritz Seider won Rookie of the Year, people are not as excited about his cards because he's a defenseman, and he's a defenseman on not a great team right now.
Yeah, it's original 16, but they've been, I mean, let's face it, they've been essentially trash for the average viewer. Nobody wants to watch that. Fans like it. Not like losing, but fans still enjoy watching the team. And I think if a player could win Rookie of the Year and still be considered underrated, I'd slap that title on him.
I mean, you look at Cale Makar, offensive defenseman. Now I'm trying to think, like, defensemen are just such a tough sell when it comes to collecting. I mean, I try to think of
They always have been.
Defensemen who are like religiously collected. Bobby Orr. And
anyone that you name off is going to be an offensive defenseman.
Yep, exactly.
Because stay-at-home defensemen get no love at all. And fourth liners and third liner guys, they get no love.
Right.
So, when you have defensive pairings that have potential Hall of Famers, they're not potential Hall of Famers because they just fall on the ground and block shots all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They're defensive Hall of Famers because not only can they remove you from the puck and put pressure and keep you out of their end, but they can also chip in and score. So you're right. I mean, Bobby Orr and ... could maybe continue that and even further, because you're going to fall down to the rest of like maybe the Hall of Fame players, but even then, very underrated.
So getting back to Skybox Metal Universe, so the cards kind of have that old school Black Diamond look to them where they're like etched in foil, but they have a cosmic background, like stars, planets. Looks like everybody's skating in front of some sort of nebula or something. I was a big fan of these cards in the 90s when they were originally out. I was super excited when they came back out last year. Probably my only sticking point is probably the price point being a little high, but that's just kind of how things are right now. Just to go over some of the inserts. So you got your 100 base cards, you got your 100 short prints. Oh, and by the way, and I'll put a picture of this, but we talk about alternate jersey cards. And so I have a Brent Burns card, and he's wearing a gray Sharks jersey. But then I have the alternate jersey Brent Burns card, and he's also wearing a gray jersey. He's just in a slightly different pose. So I don't know how really alternate it is. It's more of just an alternate photo than an alternate sweater. Anyway, so some of the insert sets, you got the jambalaya inserts, which frankly I'm not a fan of. I always think the design is ugly. It's just color chaos. But yay, you know what? Whatever. People like them. They're pretty hard to pull. So that's kind of why they're so popular. I mean, I'm sure there's another reason that you'll enlighten me with in a minute, because I don't think I've ever pulled a jambalaya card. I don't think I've ever seen one from the 90s, if they were even around back then.
Yeah, they were. They're just rare. They're hard to hit.
Yeah.
They don't pop up very often. And, when they do, they go for big bucks.
There's Big Man on the Ice, which are die-cut cards that also have like shiny foil for some of the letters. So those are kind of neat. There's, of course, the retro inserts. They call them 97, 98 designed, but I think they're referring to 97, 98 basketball. 96, 97 is when they used this particular type of design in hockey. Although with 96, 97, that was the set that had the flying eyeballs and the giant plants and the nuclear explosions and the atoms and all the real crazy stuff. You can get an autograph. I pulled a Tim Stutzla autograph. It is a sticker autograph, but that's fine. It's kind of a shiny sticker, so it kind of looks nice on the shiny card. Couple
Or as
other
I call him, Shiloh.
Shiloh? Is that what they call it?
That's what I call him, because every time I see his signature, it looks like it says Shiloh.
It does.
Yeah.
Shiloh, yeah.
You can call it whatever you want. I call him Shiloh.
Premium prospects, which, I don't really care for these. They almost remind me of like a Pinnacle type card set from the 2012 era. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, it's just a design. It's not a foil card. I think that's what threw me off about this, is that they said, hey, let's have some non-foil cards in a foil card set, which doesn't make any sense to me. Like, let's just make these normal cards that look like they could be inserts in anything.
There's autograph versions of those too.
Oh, I believe it. You got Amped Up. You got Championship Galaxy Metal. Metallics, is it?
Yeah. As much as I didn't like the Amped Up, I kind of like the Amped Up now.
All right. So you're going to be collecting them?
I don't know. Maybe. It's a guitar amp in the background. I kind of have to.
You got a guitar amp, and then you got these guitar picks, which are made of plastic.
Ah, yes. The picks.
The picks.
So the pick ones?
Yes.
Here's an interesting thing. You don't generally see picks like that. They do make them. We call them nachos because they look like a Dorito with the pointed edges, but you generally will find the picks like the traditional style pick with the rounded corners. All three corners are rounded.
Mm-hmm.
This one, only the bottom corner is rounded.
Right.
Because they wanted more die cut into the product, but less expense. And cutting that card to round the corners off would have cost a lot more. So that's why they went with that.
So what you're saying is that they cut corners by not cutting corners.
Exactly. For printing, you have to have like a full edge on this side and do this and do this, and every cut costs you something.
Right.
So, but it's funny when these came out. I think it was a day later. I saw it floating around on social media, and I can't find it again. So if somebody out there knows where this is, by all means, send it to us. But there was a video of a guy taking one of these and using it to play his guitar.
No way.
And I can't find it. Like, I saw it once, I laughed, and then it's gone. So if anybody can find that, I'd be grateful.
There's another die cut set called The Cheddar, which has a player superimposed on a wedge of cheese. So this is based on the saying top cheese or top cheddar, which refers to when a player shoots the puck right below the crossbar. I guess that's also saying top shelf. Yeah, hockey has too many ways of saying the same thing.
It does. So if you remember back when we had Billy Celio on the show, and we asked him about card designs and stuff and where he comes up with names, I don't know if you remember him saying that sometimes he just sits there and ponders all sorts of hockey slang until he comes up with something that makes sense. So all I can think of is that's probably what happened here. He was thinking of things, and there it went.
Yeah. I would have liked the cheese, or I would have liked Big Cheese. I think the Big Cheese would have been kind of funny.
Yeah, but Big Cheese, I mean, Cheddar has like all stars if you look at the checklist.
Yeah.
The Big Cheese would have to be like a bigger size card. Like, remember those triangle cards from Crown Royale from Pacific back in the day?
Oh, like Kramer's Choice?
The Kramer's Choice cards. They would have to be like that size and have like just the top 10 best players. Because that would be the Big Cheese.
I have a Kramer's Choice card floating around. I don't know where I have it. It's a big card, so it could either be with my other big cards or it might be in a binder with a set or something.
I've got a Yager one in hockey, and I believe I have a Heinz Ward one in football.
I think I got Patrick Waugh, and I think I bought that at a card shop.
It's a good one to have.
Yeah, I can't go wrong with Sir Patrick. Couple of the other inserts. So you got the Planet Metal, got Championship Galaxy. So the one Championship Galaxy card I pulled, I was thinking, all right, it's Evgeny Malkin. He's going to talk about his championship season when he was MVP. I mean, I know he's a 3-time Cup winner, but he was also the Conn Smythe winner in... What year did the Penguins win the Cup where Malkin was the Conn Smythe winner?
2009.
So, this card doesn't talk about that. It's called Championship Galaxy. but it has nothing to do with his championship. Then there's what's this other one? It's like Planet Metal. It's kind of like a shiny holofoil. So I'll accept that as well. Die cuts, holofoil, etched metal, that's all great. These premium prospects, which just look like regular cards with just a foil stamped logo. Yeah, looks like something you could get in Upper Deck. But then there's another.
Yeah, but that's the glass of water when you're binge drinking.
I don't want that, man. If I'm paying $150 a box, I want all shots, and I want all shots of the good stuff. I don't want the chaser.
You'll never get to the last pack if you don't have at least one bottle of water.
No, what's the bottle of water? The pack of all base cards?
Yeah.
Depressing.
One bottle of water. That's the intermission. They call that the intermission.
Interesting. So talk about this Pitter Patter set, because I didn't know about it. It just kind of flew under my radar until you pointed it out to me, and I think it's a really interesting set.
Yeah, those that are fans of the enforcer / goon / pest type players, this is one of those sets for you because the entire checklist is those type of players. Pitter Patter is a phrase that is ripped directly from Letterkenny. So those not familiar with Letterkenny, it's a show about, I don't even know how to describe it. It's a show about this town in Canada, and you got different groups of people. Like you got like the towny people, and you got like the burnout people, and you got like the trashy people, and there's like this mix of all these different people. One of the characters that's on there, his name's Wayne, and he always wears flannel shirts. And this is one phrase that he says all the time is pitter patter, let's get at her. And so this is yanked from there. But why that's hockey related, a big part of the show is focused around playing hockey and the hockey team and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, pitter patter, let's get at her. So Letterkenny, if I had to describe it to a friend who had never seen it, it seems to me like it's a show about people who live in a small town and just try not to be bored. Because it starts out, it says there are 5,000 people in Letterkenny. These are their problems. That's how every show starts, right? Your main protagonists are like the farmers, or the Hicks, as they refer to them in the show, right? You got your farmers.
Yeah.
Then
I
you have
think of how they divided them up.
Then you have like the burnouts who are like the druggies / break dancers that are always just kind of hanging out, dancing and doing drugs. And they're like the burnouts. And then you have like these two guys who are like local hockey players. In the show, they're playing for the local junior team, but then eventually they graduate to senior A hockey. I mean, they're not pros, but they're like playing senior hockey. So like you have like a couple of hockey playing guys, you have a couple of farmers, and you have a couple of like breakdancing / drug head, whatever, right? And so, the groups kind of get along, and they're kind of at odds with each other, but they also kind of get along. I mean, it's kind of a comedy. When you showed me that card, I go, oh yeah, that's supposed to be Wayne's flannel shirt. And I thought that was pretty
the design on it
clever.
Is his flannel shirt, because that's all he wears, it seems like. Because he's a farmer. I mean, that's what farmers wear.
And then I know like later on in Letterkenny, they get more and more involved in this like one story arc with like a hockey tournament. I don't know if you've ever watched the show.
I've watched a few episodes. I have not like binged seasons because it takes a minute.
Yeah.
This is one of those shows that takes a minute. If you're not familiar with the vernacular and that culture, it takes a minute to get into it. I'm not downplaying the show. It's pretty funny.
Then they had a spin-off series called Shoresy, which was a minor character in the show who you never saw his face because he was played by the same guy who plays Wayne. So that was kind of the thing. You never saw Shoresy. He was either you'd see his back, or he'd wear a tinted visor because he was that kind of douchey hockey player, or he'd be off camera making fun of like the other characters. And so they spun him off into his own show. I have thoughts about that, but that's not something I want to get into right now because it's not every day you get a series about hockey. And yet last year we got Mighty Ducks Game Breakers and we got Shoresy. So we actually had two very different shows targeted to very different audiences, but they were both hockey shows. So you don't see that too often. So anyway, yeah, Pitter Patter that focuses on enforcer type players or pest type players because Wayne is known as like being the toughest guy in the town of Letterkenny. Like one of the early story arcs is him getting into fist fights to kind of prove how
I think
tough
I saw
he is.
3 episodes and he got fights in all 3 of them.
Well, and now I will say this. I did not like Letterkenny. First episode, I was just like, yeah, this is okay. Second episode, I was like, yeah, this is kind of dumb. Third episode, I had to turn it off. I'm like, this is stupid. I went on Facebook and I said, this show is stupid. And then the people who didn't make fun of me said it really hits its stride by the end of the first season. And then they were right. It really hit its stride by the end of the first season. I'm like, okay, I get this show. I get this character. It's kind of like the show kind of had to figure out we're a comedy, but not like a slapstick comedy. We're kind of like more of a dry humor kind of comedy with like a little bit of drama, but nothing too heavy or too serious, kind of light. But wow, that was quite the tangent.
Well,
I think we talked
it's not
about
really a tangent because it's what the card's based off of.
I know, but I didn't get into like all the cheese recipes from like this cheddar insert of Trevor Zegras going top
Well,
cheese.
I'll tell you the one insert that I think is probably the pinnacle of all of them is the Metallics cards, whereas some people have been calling them Metal X. I believe it's Metallics. They look outstanding. They're beautiful looking cards, but they fall 1 per case, so they're really tough. And everybody's going to be trying to chase them at some point, which means those that are trying to go after the big guns like McDavid or something, based off of the checklist, I mean, that's 1 per 70 cases. So, I mean, you do the math. That's a lot. So these are going to be very rare. They're already selling for a chunk of change out there. They fall 1 per case, but the odds of getting the McDavid would be like 1 out of 70.
They're just really tough pulls at 1 per case.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole checklist of them, but they're tough. And honestly, they've been selling for some of them hundreds. Honestly, I think they might be too low right now, if you could believe that, considering how hard they are to pull. But they look great. They look awesome. I think it's the best looking design I've seen in a while.
I think what it is I think with like the Metal Universe, people really fixate on the PMG cards, and then kind of everything else kind of like, I don't know, say falls to the side, but that kind of seems to be like the chase card. If that
Yeah, I
makes
mean,
sense.
everybody goes after those because they have the history of being the card. I mean, look at
Mhm.
the Michael Jordan PMGs from way back when.
Yeah, I
Those are
know.
super premium cards, and they were rare. And a lot of times people didn't even realize what they had. Oh, wow, this is a shiny card, and it goes in a box, not realizing how rare they actually are. But the nice thing about this set is it's so jam-packed full of inserts, you don't have to focus on just the PMGs. There's something in here that I think anybody would probably enjoy to look at and go after. And there, like you said, there's so much foil and die cut. I mean, they're die cut and foiling us to death with this set, which is fine. Because the good thing is, take a look at almost all their other sets versus these, and look at all the inserts and the parallels.
Mhm.
There really aren't any. Go down the list. The only parallels that there are for any of the insert sets are either a gold or a spectrum. That's it.
Mhm.
There isn't blue and blue cubes and red prism and yellow taxi and all that other stuff. There isn't 100 different versions. There's just one. And I like that.
Yeah, that's one thing I said in my my write-up about the set is that I like the variety. I like that there's different insert sets, and that they're interesting insert sets. And like I said, whenever you do any sort of die cutting, you do any sort of foiling, you do any sort of anything out of the norm, or in the case of the picks, the plastic cards, it's more appealing to me. You know what I mean? Like, I probably won't really chase any of these insert sets, but, you know, I mean, of course, I'll chase after the players that I like, and I'm going to build the base set, and I'm going to build the short prints, and I'll probably try to chase down all the retros just because that's really what I like. You collect what you like and what you're into. So some people might like these amped up inserts. I think they're just okay, but, you know, that's fine. I mean, the fact that this set is such a creative set, I'm glad that it's around, and I hope that they continue to put it out because it's such a fun throwback 90s set. You know, it's kind of like what I wanted, maybe not the same thing, but remember Full Force?
Yeah, I do.
I wanted Full Force to be more like this, and I know Full Force actually had some interesting inserts and some die cuts, but I thought that like Full Force was going to be like that kind of goofy 90s-esque retro kind of set, and it wasn't. But this is.
Well, you at least get your wish for 22-23 because they are making that. They already sent the sell sheets and everything out for those.
Are they coming out this decade or?
Yeah, well, I can't really speak to that, but I can tell you they are. If you look up the design and what the base cards look like, they're interesting. They're definitely interesting. They remind me of the old, what was it? Score? Was it Zenith?
Mm-hmm.
I think it might have been Zenith, the one year where they had the base card, the gray, the metal, and the silver, and they all looked alike. But it reminds me of that design, like it's like a mesh. But yeah, it's got all the same kind of stuff. You know, the jambalaya back. There's a few other interesting insert sets like the metallics they brought back, but Lynch pins is one of them. All starring, which I'm assuming is based off of all-star players. You know, there's bottle rockets and cachet and your favorite, the prospect cards, which will at least get Owen Power and stuff like that in that checklist. But they brought in for next year's, or it'll be this year's because we're dealing with last year's. So when that comes out, they actually brought in artists to do illustrations.
Ooh.
So they look like the old Fleer Retro Marvel illustration cards.
Nice.
So those will be interesting when they hit.
Yeah, but those are we're talking about next year.
And we don't know when that's going to come out, but it's out there, so we'll at least get this product for one more year. I don't think they're going to make it go away. It's pretty popular.
Yeah.
And to the detractors out there that are like, well, I didn't get any autographs, and autographs are too hard to pull and all that kind of stuff. Well, if you wanted more autographs, the price point would be higher. So there's that.
That's a good point.
Can't have it both ways. So I think with the amount of inserts in there and the potential, it's some really cool stuff, although you can't get the gold PMG Caulfield, I think it's still worthwhile where its price point is right now.
Wow, look at the time. It has flown.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, and this was fun. Oh, hey, you know what, folks? I want to mention that we have a YouTube channel. Of course, it's Puck Junk, so youtube.com/puckjunk. You should come check that out. You know, we do post this podcast to YouTube, but I am going to be ramping up our videos a little bit on that in the coming weeks. I'm probably going to start doing video pack breaks again and stuff like that. Also on TikTok at Puck Junk, and then of course we're on Twitter. Tim's at TheRealDFG, and I'm at Puck Junk. And then also we have a Facebook collectors group, so that's facebook.com/puckjunk. And that's it. Thank you for listening to the podcast, and until next time, collect what you like.
For more hockey goodness, follow us on Twitter at Puck Junk.